Sam Pantazopoulos, CEO and co-founder of Vizer, if you don't know me.
Dylan, also co-founder of Vizer.
And I'll introduce our panels in a second, but we want to thank you for coming. This is the closing event for our Velocity Virtual Summit. So for the last 2 days, we've been doing a conference online where CPG founders, operators, investors, people in the community could tune into a panel that we were doing to learn more about the space. And then in theory, learn things that they could apply to their brand that would help them scale faster. So one thing that we learned really early in our journey of building Vizer was that if we tried to just figure things out, we were not going to do it as quickly and efficiently as we could. So we decided that we were going to talk to as many people as we possibly could, as frequently as we could, and ask them what they did so we wouldn't have to learn the hard way. Many of whom are sitting in this room, 2 of whom are sitting on this panel, and we'll dive into those backstories. But thank you, we're excited. We're gonna do a founding roundtable, I think is what we ended up calling it. And Dylan's gonna tell us what we're talking about.
Today, I think the theme for the past 2 days has been a lot about, retail and velocities, and then I think the last panel we did today virtually with Matt and Ari and Jen was about kind of being a founder, taking you from that 0 to 1 stage, and then ultimately exiting the brand and what you do afterwards. Is it investing, advising, all those things? So that's kind of what we want to hear from you guys today, is about your story, the amazing highs that you get, but also anyone who's an entrepreneur or has worked in an early stage company knows the next day could be the worst day of your entire life. So going through that process, and then the exit, and what you're up to now, and then we'll probably hit some Q&A and go from there.
So Sara, if you'd love to start us off, also has a reality TV background, which she'll tell us. But Sara is an advisor, get it? Clever. Advisor, has been for years. I walked into her office when I was 20, and I was like, hey, I have this idea. I don't think I communicated it clearly at all. And you were still willing to help us, and here we are years later. So would you mind telling us your backstory? And we want to hear the story.
Sure. Well,
reality shows.
Yeah, I would say the reality shows that they were referencing are really, really Emmy award-winning television. You may have heard of Room Raiders. With the black light, trying to find things on comforters. There was that one. There was Wheel of Fortune. There was another dating show called Dismissed. But yes, that was all my early 20s. But yeah, I remember that day so vividly. I was so impressed. I had no idea what she was selling, but I'm like, I'm in, I'm buying it, largely to her tenacity. And actually, I was not watching Bachelor in Paradise, but this is when I had my PR firm. There was 30 girls, and then Dylan walks in the office, and it's like a pin could drop, and girls were passing out in the back, and I'm like, I gotta watch this show. But yeah, my background is in really CPG, really through kind of PR. I started my career out prior to that at E! News and at MTV, where I did casting, and I worked in reality TV, was not a reality TV star, and then moved to New York, and I worked in beauty PR for quite a while, and then I moved out to San Diego in 2012, and I started my own agency, Covet, in 2014. And the focus is really on founder-led, mission-driven CPG brands. And that was a time where you would go to Whole Foods and there was 3 kombuchas, not 93 kombuchas. And this whole kind of wellness scene hadn't happened yet. And these big legacy brands were starting to pay attention to these smaller brands and figure out how to kind of get market share in a younger audience. And I thought there was an idea there. So I had Covet for about 6 years, and then I sold in 2020 to a strategic here in town called Power Digital. And then I stayed on for about 18 months, and then we sold to private equity last year. And then I left last May, and now I'm advising, I'm investing. I'm starting a new company called Goldilocks, which is a CPG consulting firm where we help early stage founders really with commercial strategy. So brand strategy, go-to-market strategy, communications, marketing, but I do not do PR. I still have a 2.5-year non-compete, so I do not do PR. Goldilocks does not do PR. I help founders. So yeah, that's the quick and dirty. And there's no one better / worse to be on a panel with than one of my best friends, Leigh, because she has the world's best story and stories. So I'm incredibly humbled to be with her and of course with you guys.
Thank you, Sara. We're going to dive into your story shortly. Leigh? if you would please follow that amazing.
Yes, that definitely sounded more fun and exciting than I think rolling bars for 10 years. But hi everybody, I'm the founder of Perfect Bar. Hopefully you all have tried it. It's a local San Diego favorite, I hope. But I started the business actually 18 years yesterday, or tomorrow will be our 18-year anniversary. So, almost 2 decades. I started the business when I was 19 years old, so almost half my life, pretty wild. So I definitely know so many chapters of the journey, from bootstrapping for 10 years, self-manufactured, like really how to stretch a dollar, to private equity, building teams, scaling a brand, outsourced manufacturing. We were acquired. I've ran it for the last 4 years, reporting into a publicly traded company. So just a crazy 18 years that I feel like I've definitely earned some badges along the way. But very excited to just have this roundtable and get to share with you guys today. The reason why we started our brand was really just to take care of our family. I always thought our refrigerated peanut butter bar, our family recipe, was always going to be niche. If you would have asked us back in 2005 when we founded, like, what do you think this is going to be? Hopefully it just puts food on the table, it takes care of our brothers and sisters until we can come up with something better. It's really all kind of we knew how to do to control our destiny. My dad, who was our breadwinner for our family, I'm one of 13 kids. I'll give a tiny bit of the backstory, I guess. But I grew up on a bus, in a motorhome, homeschooled. Our family grew to 13 kids. My dad and mom were kind of hippie, like holistic, nomads around the country. So fast forward, that lifestyle of kind of, nothing in our back pocket and that's okay, kind of caught up to them. My dad was diagnosed with melanoma, and our family really quite literally faced separation. 9 were younger than 18. My youngest sister was 3. And so we came together with our GEDs in our hands, no formal education, not a lot to our name as a family, and what could we do to kind of try and keep everybody together? Let's take that family recipe. We sold it in Ziploc bags for a while. We bought a candy wrapper off of eBay. We opened a kitchen. It was never intended to be some big business. And so I think we ended up making really good decisions, like very sound decisions in those early days, not bringing on investors, not doing things like that, and allowed kind of the industry to catch up. Like launching a refrigerated bar back in 2005 was way ahead of its time. And so I think it just paid off that we can kind of sit and just build through a grassroots movement for a long, long time. So anyway, it clearly isn't what I thought it would be in a good way, but excited to share more of that today.
And Salt's the largest snack, Mondelez is the largest snack brand, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Woo.
Do you see why we picked these two to close it out? I think you guys have done everything in terms of the entrepreneurial life cycle, right? Like starting something, growing it, scaling it, and then deciding what you want to do afterwards. And I think as I look at the audience, there's a lot of builders in this room, and I know tuning in virtually there are a lot of builders as well. And before we dive into the details of things, I would love to know, just looking back, being on the other side of things, for somebody who's maybe building something for the first time, what would you go back and tell yourself? What did you learn only in reflection?
I definitely would not tell myself how hard it was, because I don't think I would have done it. And you don't know what you don't know what you don't know. And I think there was such a beauty in the naivety of just going and doing something and just seeing. And so I think I probably wish earlier on I surrounded myself with people that had either done what I did or were smarter or better. I learned 2 years in that you really need, whether they're formal advisors or mentors, but it's so hard to do something when you I didn't go to business school, Leigh didn't go to school. Well, GD, homeschool. And so you kind of have this imposter syndrome. I didn't go to Wharton. I don't know what a P&L is. I remember first time someone said, "What is your EBITDA?" And I was I just didn't know those things. And until you start to surround yourself with people that can tell you you don't know what you don't know, you don't know it. So I think the best advice is to just surround yourself with people that are smarter than you and have done it. And to also the more people I met in this space that are founders, the more you realize everyone actually feels like that, whether you actually went to Wharton or not. And so having some humility and not being so hard on yourself I think would have shaved some years off.
I totally agree with the imposter syndrome part, right? I do think there's a value for entrepreneurs when you are really good at not having to have things perfect, like progress over perfect. We have to just like do the best, make a decision. If you're not moving forward, then you're absolutely moving backwards. And so that type of mindset, it's really actually kind of good that you don't know what you don't know what you don't know, right? Because you'll like really then you would only see the huge mountain and go, gosh, I don't have all the pieces perfectly put together to know how to reach the top. There's just a certain, that kind of naivete, like you said, about just being so ruthless about just taking one step forward, right? I do think though, on the flip side, if I were to look back and tell myself, hey, how to navigate maybe a few missteps a little bit easier, definitely look around and find advisors and people who have been there, done that. We reinvented the wheel 10 times over because I didn't have a network. I didn't know. I also think the CPG landscape was very different almost 20 years ago, that you did not have what you have available to you today. So there's, huge advantage there, but find people that have been there, done that really share the same like values that you do, and make sure that you get good people on your team. I think there's a lot of a-holes out there that do business, and then also a lot of really kind people. And so I think we've been really fortunate to kind of wait for those really kind and good people to come along, and it just makes the ride that much more fun.
We had a very intelligent founder today on one of the virtual panels who said you only want to pay the experience tax once. So
Yeah.
I 100% agree,
True.
surrounding yourself with founders. But I'd love to hear kind of like, 'cause when the four of us first met, Sam and I mean, she may have a different opinion, we had no idea what the fuck we were doing. And I'd like to think that a lot of first-time founders, hopefully, nearly 100%, probably don't know what they're doing. And I'm not sure if it was the same for you guys, but I would love to hear about the early days, like incorporating the company, trying to get your first customer. Like, what were those days like?
Yeah, my story is a little interesting in the sense, like I kind of accidentally fell into it. I was doing PR for Suja at the time, and Suja, this was in 2012, and so Suja, local brand, organic cold pressed juice, really the first brand to like make like beverages sexy in that way. And so I was doing their PR. I was approached by someone who was doing their performance marketing. They're like, you should go start your own PR firm. I was like, no, I would never do that. I'm not, like, my dad was the type that's like, never ask for a raise, let them come to you. Like, I just didn't grow up like pushing the envelope in that way. And so I didn't think I could do it. And so, but then they're like, hey, we'll be like a startup on like training wheels. Like, we'll give you like infrastructure and clients, and like we're both in CPG. And so I left this, I'm making sure no one here is at that agency. I left that agency. I pulled like a Jerry Maguire. I took the biggest client, Suja. I left, and then I looked at the contracts, and I was like, oh my God, like they're basically giving me like a LegalZoom account and like getting 66% of the company, but I'd already left, and I'd already taken this big client with me, and like kind of burned a lot of bridges. I'll never forget when, never send an email from your work email to your new company, because they do have access to that. And I'll never forget, I was like, they're like, hey Sara, can you come meet us in the HR office? And I was like, sure. And like they were sitting there and they're like, pack your stuff. And I like took my like pencils, and I walked by the conference room, which was like a glass door, and all my friends were waving. I mean, it was so humiliating. And then I didn't actually like have a company because I was getting totally screwed by these other people. So I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So then I was in Paris at Victoria's Secret Fashion Week with Suja because they were a sponsor, and I saw Damon John from Shark Tank, and I went up to Damon John and I was like, can I just take a few minutes of your time? I was like, these people want 66%, I get 33%, what do you think I should do? And he was like, he's like, I really like your chutzpah. Well, I don't think he said chutzpah. Definitely didn't say chutzpah. And he was like, come meet me in my FUBU office in New York in 2 days. Like, I want to do something with you. And I was like, I'm on it. And so I went to the office. I had like lawn extensions to my hips. I go to the FUBU office, like everyone's in grills. I like don't have a company. I don't have anything. And he's like, so tell me your company. And so then he wanted to do something with me, and he wanted me to do PR for his Shark Tank brands. Come to find out, that contract was even worse. So now I'm like, everyone sees something in me that I don't see in me, and that's kind of how I started it. So I guess to answer your question, it took other people in me, and then I got a great lawyer. I did that really wrong order of operations there, as you can see from my story. And then it kind of, my first client was Suja, and then Suja got me other clients, and then I took on some real randos that first year to make payroll. And then it kind of just grew from there.
So the early years, okay, we'll go back a couple decades. Founded on LegalZoom, as we all did. And we didn't own our trademark all the way up to raising money. That was fun. So we called Perfect Foods Bar. We just put a TM next to it because that's what things look like. No, we didn't own the trademark. So we quickly found a new name, and Perfect Bar is available. Even better, got that trademark. Just in the nick of time. But in those early years, we're self-manufactured, quite literally making our bars with rolling pins, hand cutting them with cookie cutters, like welded down at the local weld shop, like super humble operation. I remember hiring our first employee. It was just my brothers, sisters, and I making bars, like equipment off of like auction here in San Diego, and like, so we hire our first employee off of Craigslist, of course, and he walks in and we interview him, but we also needed his help that day. So I was like, great, so you can start right now. He's like, oh, okay. Poor Austin was with us for like 12 years, 11, but so then he's like, what do I do? Do you have a manual? I was like, definitely no. So what you do is like squish, squish, pat, pat. Like it's just, you have to start somewhere. And I think like it's just remembering where you came from is so important. But how do you get through it and grow? You have to like be so humble. You know, you have to like ask the dumbest questions, be bold, walk up to anybody. I think looking back, definitely ask more questions to the right people. But we just were so willing to do anything it took. But yeah, that's always so many fun memories along the way. But Craigslist, right, growing our team, but we scaled that, making rolling pins to like 7 million bars, I think was our last year using rolling pins. And then my brother, Bill, who many of you maybe know here, my fearless co-founder, he comes to me, we were like a natural brand, so available like primarily in Sprouts and Whole Foods and things like that, primarily West Coast, really just trying to not grow, because if we grew it meant I had to make more bars. And I was like, I'm trying to have fun. I'm trying to go out in downtown Stingery, remember that? That was big. So it's like also trying to be like 25, you know, and my brother is out there selling, and I'm kind of back on there was no marketing team. We really never marketed our product. We just stood in the store, did demos, and it's like flew off the shelf. So it's like this continued building. He's like, Leigh, I know you're gonna be mad, but I got us into Costco. And I literally was holding my rolling pin, making bars. He's like, who's gonna make those bars? He's like, we'll figure it out, you know? So anyway, I gotta go. And I was like, no. So every time it's really, also part of it, like if you can, find a co-founder that is not just you. You need to find like your balance if that's possible, or an advisor or somebody that can push you along the way. Bill was like, he would shoot and then point and aim, and I would like point and aim but maybe never shoot, and I think having that balance was really valuable in our business. But then he's like, it's just 5 clubs. Pallet for each club. Keep in mind, it took me like a week to make 1 pallet of bars, you know, and now we had 5 So it's quite funny looking back that we didn't want to sell more bars, you know, we couldn't make any more. It was just, I never thought our product could be made on a large scale equipment. We were told it couldn't. So it was like, we're good, this is fine. Like I go to Hawaii and do road shows at Costco sometimes, hang out there for a month. Like we just really were trying to not grow, which is quite funny. And I'm like, I think I have to give up on that idea that this isn't going to be anything. I think this is going to be something. So we were approached by private equity. I told my brother, do not answer that phone call. We are fine. And they audited us, VMD Partners, who are behind like many of like the largest success stories in CPG. They're like, you guys know you have like 2 million in AR, 2 million in AP, and you have $200 in your bank account. And you have 2 days of finished goods in the warehouse. I was like, I got the orders covered tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Like, we're good. And he's like, you're sitting on a gold mine. We're being approached by Target and Walmart and doing really well in Costco. And it was just like trying to hold it back. And I think finally stepping back and Bill and I saying, you know, okay, maybe this isn't this niche idea. Like we felt we were this like niche family that we're just kind of the weird outliers. Maybe this is something that could be mainstream. Keep in mind, we were 10 years in business. That's a long time, you know, just kind of grinding along. And so really from 2015 to 2019, it was like 42 months, we grew by like 130 million in revenue. In 41 months, something like that. So it was just a huge rocket ship ride, outsourced our manufacturing. It built a team. I think honestly, out of those 10 years of grind, the hardest year was that first year with private equity, because I really had to kind of grow up and sit at that table and find my voice. Like, it was easy to just be in my family, have my own show, but I think I was really afraid to like put myself out there and be responsible to yet more people, right? I've taken care of my brothers and sisters. Like, it's intimidating. Like, I think on my back for a long time, I was that kid, that weirdo, like growing up on the bus, like my parents. I just saw myself in a certain light, and all of a sudden it's like, here you go, sit at the table, you know, are you up for it or not? And so imposter syndrome all the way. And then you have folks sitting around you kind of seeing something in yourself that you don't see in yourself. So, you know, finding the right folks that really believe in you. But yeah, it's been wild. That was way more than just the beginning.
That was great, though. It was perfect, and it teed up what I was going to ask, too, because we were having lunch with Bill, and we were explaining our dynamic, where I said the same thing. I'm like, he'll just rush ahead, and then I have to come after him and be like, you did what? And Bill's like, yeah, that was me, too. It was the same thing. But I think what we're curious about is what you were explaining. As time went on, your role shifted, and it's happening super fast. 10 years is fast at the end of the day for building a brand of that size. So it's like your role's changing, the company dynamics changing, and the expectations are changing, and you're having to learn as you go. Like, your job, your expectations changes every year. How did you handle the pace of growth that was required on you as operators and leaders in the team?
I think for me, I went through two different phases. I think one was like scaling Covet, my agency, from being like me and an intern to, you know, like 50 people. And the other was when I sold. And when I sold to Power Digital, we were about 50 at the time. They were about 100, and we grew to about 720 people in 18 months. And we were owned by private equity, and we were gearing up for another exit. And so when they purchased Covet, I knew it was part of a strategy to purchase other companies and then like roll that up and then sell. So being owned by private equity, for anyone who's worked for a company owned by private equity, is so different than like having a lifestyle company. Like, it's just a totally different beast. Like, there's so many wonderful things about it, but when I ran Covet, it was like, I knew my numbers, I knew what margin I wanted to stay around, and I said no to clients all the time because they didn't fit our profile, and I only hired, you know, these certain people. And then when you're owned by private equity, it's like you have a number to hit, and you kind of do it like you just have to do it. And so for me, I think the biggest change I've gone through as an entrepreneur was like going from like running the show and having like a very meticulous process to like giving up a little, not giving up, but like knowing that it's just done differently, and that's kind of how you have to scale. And then amazing people, amazing processes, but it was hard for me to go from like something that had my handprints all over it to something that it was just big league business, I think is another way to say it. I mean, it's just totally different. I don't know if that was similar for you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean our private equity days was like wonderful, actually, because we owned majority of the company. So great, we could continue doing what we wanted. We had we had a 5-year strategy in mind, but we did really well there. I think the biggest challenges our brand has faced in recent years was certainly we're an on-the-go snack, and the pandemic did not do well for the nutrition bar category. Like, huge suppression. The category was down more than 20%. We were down 12. We still grew overall because of channel strategy growth, but very compressed category because 60% of our consumption happens away from home, on your 40% in the car on the way to your office. You're like, great, that's a fabulous stat. Nobody's leaving.
December 2019?
We sold July of 2019. So I think stepping back, right now, I've ran the business under Mondelez, a publicly traded company, huge multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. And to try and parse out what parts of like the change was COVID versus what parts was reporting into a big company, I think we need to be sure and give each part equal credit. We operate independently here out of San Diego. I honestly think they've done a fabulous job. Like, they really, like, we all know back in the day, like brands like Kellogg kind of absorbing Kashi and what happened to that brand. Like, there's many examples of how these conglomerates can kind of sit on the culture of these young brands, and you really stifle what you actually bought, the value of all of that. So we have our headquarters here, but everything was shut down. And so as we all were, but especially on the Go Snacks, we've never operated in the red as a brand. Like 15 years, things are flying off the shelf, and then here you go, you're acquired, and then you just hit brick walls. Starbucks stores closed. We do a ton of business with Starbucks, Trader Joe's, everything, right, kind of hit the fan. And so navigating through that, super challenging, but honestly, reporting into kind of publicly traded business, to your point, you have an annual contract with them, so maybe what you experience in your private equity is now what we experience with our strategic. And I think in the end, you have to be more risk averse, right? Because you kind of have to hedge your bets and then make sure you hit that number kind of at all cost, whether that's like your net revenue and your EBITDA. But we continue to try and step back, especially in my role now as kind of an advisor to our leadership team. Like, let's make sure that we can kind of take advantage of the best of big and small. It's kind of our motto today within Perfect Bar. Like, what are the advantages of Perfect Bar, of our headquartered here in San Diego, our team, our culture, and then how can we pull resources from Mondelez and really leverage millions of dollars in savings in supply chain, like $30 million in consumer data, like we can really punch above our weight class, and that's why we, had made this decision in the first place. So I feel like we're post-COVID now, really finding our stride, and happy to say, like, really, thrilled with how everything's turned out, and love kind of my role now, be able to sit back and say, what if we tried, really
Yeah.
I have two questions. We can put them together, but I feel like entrepreneurs go into this saying like, oh, there's a very clear formula. I need to hit 10 million in sales and have this margin, and I get acquired by this brand at this multiple. But I think everybody can agree that 9 out of 10 times doesn't go according to plan. Was going through the acquisition for both of you a part of the original plan? And then afterwards, what was that moment like? Because I feel like I hear from a lot of founders who exit where it's not as joyous as you might imagine prior. You kind of feel like, well, I've just spent 18 years doing this, and it's now it's not mine. So what I guess is like that process and experience?
I still have PTSD, but not because, more so just because my experience was crazy. I did not start the company to sell, and I had been approached over the years from private equity and different strategics, and it just never was something I really entertained. But I was approached by Power Digital, and they're here in town. I know Grayson really well. I really respect him. I really liked him, and I saw that PR was changing, and in order to stay relevant, we had to do more in the performance marketing side, whether we acquired a company, whether we merged, and so that piqued my interest. And then I was 6 months pregnant. I had a 1.5-year-old, and I was like, I'm tired, so that piqued my interest, but I wasn't seeking it. And then I signed the LOI on Christmas Eve of 2019. I gave birth to my second on February 10th. I was supposed to close on March 25th, and on March 23rd, they're like, sorry, deal's off because of COVID. And I was like, huh? I literally almost went into labor 10 times prior. I was in due diligence. I was in the data room. I was negotiating. I was so stressed. Yeah, I was in the data room. Just hanging out in the data room with Leigh. It was just so stressful. There was times I'd be like, I'll sell it for $1, just take it. I was just so, deal fatigue is real. And so for me, they're like, listen, we've all spent a ton of money on legal fees, and we really like your business, but we don't know what this pandemic is. We don't know what it's going to do to PR. We don't know what it's going to do to consumer packaged goods. And it was challenging because I took an 8-day maternity leave, and then during that process, you run your business very differently when you're going through a sale process. You're saying yes to clients that maybe you wouldn't take on because you're optimizing for EBITDA, and you're running things really lean, and then for them to be JK, I was like, okay. So I had to go back to the company, and then I was like, well, what are we gonna do? And they're like, let's stay in touch. And luckily, we did really well during those next 4 months because we had a hand sanitizer brand, and we were really insulated in CPG with brands that were doing really well. And so they came back, and then in July we ended up closing. But between Christmas Eve, December 19, and July 2020, there was a pandemic. I had a 3-year-old. I had a newborn. It was just so crazy. So it did not happen as intended. I did not seek a buyer, but all is well that ends well.
I like that. You definitely have so many emotions, right? first bringing on private equity and kind of being responsible to a board table. It feels different. But then, of course, like it not being your company anymore, it's just such a bizarre feeling. And Bill was able to ride off in the sunset, no problem. He's like, bye, where do I turn in my key? I was like, what? Aren't you like, do you want to stay forever? He was like, no, I'm gone. He actually brought his laptop. I was like, you can keep that. He's like, don't people turn in their laptops? I was like, nobody wants that laptop, Bill. You've been eating salmon and clumping your fingers on there. But he really was like, Leigh, I can't worry about this business anymore. It isn't like part-time, I'll worry about it, and I've got to just shut off. And so I definitely applaud him for that. And I'm actually like weeks in after bringing on a new CEO for our business only as of January 1. And so I've onboarded her in the first quarter this year. So now stepping into kind of, this advisory role, I think I will say it here, guys, this is my self-help group. I think I'm having a hard time letting go. But I know I can help. I can be so helpful. Let me in. But I also just love watching these amazing minds around. I mean, just step back and go, what? Like we have amazing marketers and agencies and the people doing Super Bowl commercials talking about, you like watch out, this is pretty exciting. We're gonna cross 200 million in revenue and like plans to 500 and like that's very real. And so to like see my little baby picture and my girls call them mommy's bars when we go into Starbucks, and it's like, it's still so personal for me. So I'll just, as long as my key keeps working, I just show up there and I hang out. But it is amazing, I've been able to build the leadership team I've left behind or that I continue to support there, all like my friends, like hang out with them socially. So I feel like I'm still involved. My husband, when I'm like in the shower going like, so we got a hold of Starbucks and we're gonna talk about pumpkin, and he's like, who cares? Right. Let's do something else. So I'm just still very much like, I'll always be so passionate about my brand, but trying to figure out how, as like now just a founder, not an operator, how do I kind of let my little 18-year-old adult baby like go off to college, So I'm in it, guys. We'll talk again in a year.
The support group will come back.
Perfect.
And we'll check in.
Yeah.
I think that was perfect. That teed it up. The 18-year-old baby, right? And I think you were 19 when you started. And how old were you when you started, Covet?
33.
33?
Yeah.
And you both have kids.
Yep.
So your company was a season of your life, and it's going to be a part of your life moving forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you also have family, you have relationships, you have friendships outside of that. Like, what does your life look like through the context of being an entrepreneur, and what's next for both of you?
I think that's such a good question. I now advise some companies that, like agencies in particular, that want to go through an exit, and like they're like, was it so hard? Like, wasn't it your baby? I'm like, luckily I had real babies to give me some perspective, because it kind of is. It's like you're introduced, oh, this is who you are. Like, it becomes so intertwined with your identity that it is a really like mind F to like not do that anymore. But I had so many other things in my life that were fulfilling, and I'm still super connected to the industry, and I think that's helped too. I'm connected because I want to be. So whether it's like advising brands or what, I still feel like I have a foot in and can help. But my life, I think, is so much richer for what I've done. And Leigh has 3 girls, and I have a girl and a boy, and it feels good. Like Georgie would come to my office, and I felt like I grew up with a stay-at-home mom who I remember when I told her I was pregnant, she's like, oh, so is Covet closing? Like she couldn't even like comprehend that I was gonna work still. And I feel like really proud that I was able to be a working mom, but I definitely have more balance now, which is a lot nicer. We're going to Wimbledon in July, so we have balance now. It was our golden ticket we wanted to do forever.
Yes, I know. Finding balance. I'm in the midst of it. 3 girls under 5, and so that, to your point, is kind of forced perspective and is quite a bit, grounding and time-consuming. But finding balance, still finding that balance, you guys. But now starting to advise brands and invest in brands and kind of have time. I don't want to just make an investment if I can't actually be really helpful. So like clearing up enough time so I can really sit at the table and be valuable. Joining some boards, like joined naturally San Diego, so I get to hang out with Sara some more. and also some Women on Boards project that I'm flying up to San Francisco on Monday for. We place women on boards across kind of middle market CPG. So just finding, making space for something new. But, I kind of get that the value of still kind of having a foot in the door with my own business. Just really have to figure out how to not worry about it 60, 80 hours a week because I don't get paid to do that anymore.
But you're still going to go to the office.
But I'll still be in the office because my key works. And I've got perfect bars for everybody.
No, this has been awesome. I feel like we could do this for hours, and I think we can move on to questions.
Tips for co-founder. I think like appreciating each other's strengths, right? And like your differences. Like I said with my brother, like we drove each other nuts, but I also did know, okay, I need you and you need me, and that was really helpful. And I couldn't just have another me sitting next to me because then we would just work things till they were perfect, and he was like, we got Costco, moving on. So I think appreciating that. And then also now I really have to actively go find Bill on the pickleball court or something, enjoy each other's company now, because when you're not running a business together, I miss the days when I was elbow deep in peanut butter with my brothers and sisters. We got Sprouts and cheersing beers down in OB, and every little win meant so much to us, and we spent 80 hours a week with each other. And now everybody is awesome. They're off, my brother's whittling furniture in Belize. I'm cool, I don't see him anymore. Not Bill, a different one. And my siblings are kind of going off and trying their own things, and we have to really actively kind of took for granted all that time we had together. So I don't know, enjoy that cousin time. You fight and then you hug it out.
How many siblings were involved?
One time there were 7.
Wow.
And I'd fire him and then they'd come back. Bill is the good guy, I'm the bad guy. So I'd be like, nope, he's out of here. He keeps sleeping on the walk-in, and then he'd come back on Monday. Bill said I could work here again.
I think what you're talking about is what is your reason to be? What is your brand strategy? Why are people coming to the brand? Why are they choosing you and not someone else? And largely why I started Covet was because I believe that consumers now really need to be connected with the brand or the grandma, whatever it is. And if you're in a sea of brands and there's not a reason and there's not a story, I think it's a lot less of a bigger driver. So the tactical way, there's lots of ways to do it. You can do it with qualitative research to understand who are your current consumers, who are potential consumers. There's a million different, SWOT analysis and quant research you can do. But I think ultimately, what it comes down to is authenticity tends to usually work if you really have a true story. I've worked with not a lot of brands because that wasn't my specialty, but a handful of brands that would come and they had a great product, but it was 2 rich dudes that found an opportunity, and I was like, oh, how am I going to do this? And you look at a story like Leigh's, it's people love the bar because it's delicious, but there's the story on the back, and I think that's a big reason why people go. And so I'm a big believer in brand and connection.
I absolutely, there are easy ways to figure out what resonates with consumers because you have such limited amount of space, but I think an authentic story, wherever that lives, whether it deserves to be on your package or somewhere on your website or in your storytelling, that's part of why you're here, how you started, and it matters to you, then it matters, that's what wakes you up. That's part of a legacy you're carrying on. That's the name of your product, so it absolutely matters. That's the picture on the front. So I think that wherever it ends up getting prominence, whether it's on pack or website or however you tell that story, you can really bring that to life, and it can show up in how your values are written on your wall someday and in your mission statement, and kind of we're all in the end just wanting more people to people connection, and so I was told after private equity joined, we brought not the right person to head marketing, and I didn't want to be a founder that couldn't let people lead and be autonomous in my company. And so all part of that year kind of figuring out who I was at the table. But this person had removed our family story from the packaging without asking, and I was like, big girl pants, let's walk into this very intimidating office of this big CPG person we had brought in, and I was like, this is something we would need to talk about. And she super condescendingly said, this brand is much bigger than your little story now. And I was like, I don't think this is gonna work out. And anyway, ended up parting ways that day, and so you just have to follow your gut. Fast forward 4 years, sitting at the strategic table with Mondelez, and there's like a 72-page document just around the Keith family story and their like rights in perpetuity to talk about it with every baby picture. Like signing that mattered more to them than even the recipe. That when they asked consumers, like, do you like this brand? They would call it the family brand, not even like Perfect Bar. Like they referenced it as like, oh, that family bar that's in the fridge. And so I think you do have to follow your gut. You're the founder, you know what matters to you, and that's gonna end up mattering to your team, and your consumers are gonna feel that. If you're trying to prop up a story, then they'll read through that as well. So it's like, be authentic.
I'm employee number 1 technically with 3 founders of the company that I'm at right now, and I'd love like any advice that you can have from like a CEO, co-founder perspective to give to like employee number 1 at the company, like from like a long-standing point if like they're looking to hang around for a while.
Yeah, I think back to my second employee who started as my first intern, and she was with me through both exits. And there was just something about her where she always had an owner first mindset, where most people kind of clock in, clock out, but from the beginning, she was so young and she had like no right, and I don't say right in a bad way, but like there was nothing financially incentivizing her. She just had this like tenacity and loyalty, and I always just felt like I could count on her because it was an owner first mindset, and like she was very well rewarded for that throughout the journey. And so, you know, when things got tough, I could just count on her. So I think like showing up to your employer and letting them know that you're that is priceless. I mean, to this day, I would like die for this person because she was just there through the thick and thin.
Austin, he was around for, I couldn't get rid of him actually. No, I don't. I think to your point, right, really being there to support the founders. I think sometimes you can be a great perspective, like to be able to step back. That's what they're looking for, to bring in like really sharp minds that are skilled in their like expertise, and just offer up that perspective, be a sounding board, and help your 3 founders kind of fly in the same direction. So I think to your point, like speaking up and like definitely having a voice and not being intimidated by that, so you really drive value. I want people that are going to argue like their ideas with me and show me their passion, and not just be like, oh, anyway, I don't agree, I'm not going to say anything, and I'll take my paycheck and just whittle my way out the door. It's like you really want somebody, and if you don't have founders that like really want you to kick down the door and give them your ideas, you shouldn't want to work there, you know. And so I really respect that type of person.
We're so honored that both of you came. So thank you so much. This closes our Velocity conference, year 1. Thank you, and have a fabulous rest of your night.